Right, we're going to take a look at what's grabbing headlines around the world with Florence Villeneuve, who's back in the studio with me. Flo, papers are focusing on the situation in Zimbabwe, of course. Longtime President Robert Mugabe is reportedly refusing to step down immediately, despite growing calls for his resignation. The 93-year-old was put under house arrest during that military takeover on Wednesday.
Indeed. Let's start with the Mail and Guardian, so a South African paper that's taking a look at what's happening behind the scenes in Zimbabwe. Essentially, there's a power struggle to try and determine who could succeed to Robert Mugabe. You can see here they're saying that Zimbabwe is keeping it in the family with this quote-unquote coup, because of course they're not calling it a coup d'etat. This article actually quotes an international relations expert who says this is not a revolution. This is an elite changing of power from within the same movement and the same history. The battle for the country's political future still remains very much a family affair within the ranks, essentially, of the ruling ZANU-PF party.
Well, the army moved in after Mugabe sacked his vice president last week, signalling that he favoured his wife, Grace Mugabe, to take over the party and therefore the presidency.
Indeed. Let's take a look actually at a paper in Zimbabwe. This is News Today, which is a Harare-based independent paper that says, actually, you know what, this might have been the last straw for many people within the party and without the party, outside of the party. I'll get there. You can see here in this article.
It's all right.
In this article, to quote the article, it says, there might have been a residue of sympathy for Robert Mugabe, but many were repulsed by Grace Mugabe and her brand of politics. She was brash and condescending with a penchant for humiliating adults in public. Now, this article says, look, the demise of Mugabe's rule won't be mourned. And you can see they're talking about the end of an era, but you might be able to read that first line there. It says this actually could have been entitled The End of an Error, so a mistake, a 37-year-old error.
Wow, and that's how long Mugabe has been in power, nearly 4 decades. And some papers are pointing out that he's the last of a certain generation of African politicians.
Indeed. Let's take a look at an article in Slate Afrique, which points out that he is the last of, I guess you could say, the fathers of independence, the last of African leaders who fought for their country's independence and then ran the country or their country for decades. And there's quite a long list of leaders from that generation. You have, for instance, Jomo Kenyatta from Kenya, who former freedom fighter. He led Kenya to independence in 1963 and led the country until his death in 1978. Of course, we've been talking about his son, Uhuru, who was elected president in 2013 and then again in 2017. Of course, this election being contested. And let's take a look at one last cartoon in The Independent this time, talking about the situation in Zimbabwe. You can see quite a grim cartoon here showing Mugabe here being torn apart, I guess, by vultures. And you might be able to notice that there's that bird flying up there. Well, that is his wife, Grace Mugabe.
Okay. Well, we're moving stateside now, where Democratic Senator Al Franken has apologised for a photo where he's seen groping a woman as she slept.
Indeed. You can see this photo in an article in the Washington Times. This is the photo in question. Franken says the photo was intended to be funny, but it clearly wasn't. He says, I should not have done this. This incident happened in December 2006, so before he entered politics. He was touring, entertaining U.S. troops with a woman named Leanne Tweeden in this photo, who claims that he also forcibly kissed her while they were rehearsing for one of their skits. Now, conservative papers like the Washington Times are loving every single minute of this. Why is that? Well, it's because Al Franken has been quite a witty critic of Donald Trump, and so I guess you could say they're enjoying a little bit of schadenfreude here. But also, this article is making fun of the whole media frenzy that we've been seeing in the wake of this wave of allegations of sexual harassment, be it in politics, entertainment, everything. You can see they're talking about Gropergate. This is the crime of our century, and this article longs for the day when you could use terms like sweet and pretty young women. Quite an interesting article here. Let's take a look at a tweet as well. Donald Trump, quick to jump on the Twitter wagon here. You can see he says this Al Frankenstein picture is really bad. It speaks 1,000 words. Where do his hands go in pictures 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 while she was sleeping? Of course, this coming from Donald Trump, who once boasts about grabbing women in a certain area.
in a certain area. Okay, good point. We're moving on to another story where papers are continuing to focus on that record-breaking sale of the Leonardo da Vinci painting Salvator Mundi for $400 million, or 450, including fees.
Fees, exactly. It's enough
a lot
to
of fees.
make you dizzy.
Oh
exactly.
my gosh,
We'll get
my
to that.
eyes are watering just thinking.
How in the world did this painting become so expensive? You can read about this in The Guardian because, of course, art prices have been rising over the years, but this really is quite dizzying for everyone, including art experts. So check out The Guardian if you want to figure out just how it happened. And, of course, there are those fees for Christie's, the auctioning house. And that you can read about and you can see in a cartoon in the New York Times, of course, by Chapat, where they're saying, who is the genius who painted the painting? Well, the real genius, according to Chapat, is actually Christie's. Now, the New York Times, in its editorial, it must be said, is a little bit disgusted by this high price. Something has gone wrong in the balance of value and values, and it says the subject of the painting, Savior of the World, makes it all the more lamentable.
Okay, all right, Flo, thank you so much for that. Florence Villeminot there.